Welcome to the What is Smart podcast. We dive deep into the ever-evolving world of intelligence, learning, and success. Join us as we engage with leading educators, psychologists, technologists, and thinkers, unraveling insights and challenging old notions. From EQ to creativity, from tech savviness to social awareness, What is Smart is your guide to understanding intelligence in the 21st century. Let's change education together. What's going on, everybody? It's Garrett here for What is Smart. What is Smart is brought to you by the Gardens Foundation, www.thegardensfoundation.org. Do me a favor, guys. I'm clearly in the laboratory, mixing potions, doing the science, having the teams in the vans, all working on the future of learning and education, but that costs money, and we need your help. If you could visit our website, donate. You can also buy merch. We have sweatshirts, t-shirts that say What is Smart, the logo on it. It's a great conversation to have at parties. I'm fascinated with the answers, so much so that I started a show around it. So thank you so much. Today we have an amazing guest. His name is Ryan Steuer, and let's get into it. Okay, everybody, welcome to What is Smart, where we delve into the future of education and the innovative minds shaping it. Today, we're excited to have Ryan Steuer with us. Ryan is an author and a thought leader specializing in project-based learning, close to my heart, coaching, and community building. He's passionate about transforming education to create a world where students graduate with employability, skills, and purpose. Ryan has worked with school leaders from districts of all sizes, helping them implement PBL, achieve their educational vision, and maintain a healthy work-life balance. When he's not guiding educational leaders, Ryan enjoys the great outdoors with his wife and 5 kids. I have 5 kids too, exploring the US in their RV. My dream. It's not functional for me though. Join us as we explore Ryan's mission to revolutionize education through PBL. Welcome, Ryan, to the show.
Oh, Garrett, thanks for having me. Come on, man. We got 5 kids together. I love it. Get them in the RV and get them moving.
Dude, we tried. We rented an RV. It happened to be kind of a busted, they all look good on the pictures, and then you get in them.
Oh yeah.
You'll enjoy this. The first, we get in, sit down, get my 5 kids in. One is not pretty much nonverbal autistic, verbal to get his needs met. We get everybody in the car, and I turn on the windshield wiper, and it flies off.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was like, all right, well, here we go to Kentucky from Virginia. So very bad experience there. I secretly look at videos of, camper vans and all of that, solar, that's my secret passion. So props to you. Speaking of you, obviously, thank you so much for joining us in the show. We like to get right into it with an origin story. So tell our audience of listeners and viewers a little bit about, 1, how you got into education, 2, what enlightened you to project-based learning, and then 3, how you took that into writing a book and, really speaking to innovative PBL across the country.
Yeah, super good stuff. That's a lot. We can do it though. So I did a good job in high school. I did what I was supposed to do. I got a 4.2, three-sport athlete, went to go be an engineer at a Fortune 50 company. And it turns out that my 2 favorite days were when we worked with kids with United Way. Right.
Very cool.
Right. And I was a super good engineer. I love the geekiness of it. Right? I love all those pieces, but it turns out it wasn't my passion. And nobody ever asked me what my passion was. Right. I was good at math and science. So they said, go be an engineer. Driving trains? No, it's different. Right. And so I went and did it, but it was wait a minute, I really like working with kids. So what's the deal? What's that look like? So jumped ship and started teaching 8th grade English on the southwest side of Indianapolis. Started using project-based learning about, halfway in. Because I found out when I was teaching traditionally, what worked for me in high school didn't work for the kids in my classroom. It was super different. I didn't know that you could just get a 30% in language arts and just move on, right? It was wait a minute, how do I reach these kids? Because I was there to reach kids, right? That was my passion, and it wasn't happening. So project-based learning came along, and in a school of 951 kids, 7th and 8th grade, so a large middle school, we had 25% of the kids in a PBL environment, and we had 8% of the discipline. We had 1.5% higher in attendance, and in an F school, we would have been a B on standardized tests.
Wow.
And it's working. They're showing up to school, and they're generally doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? There's still 8% of discipline. They were still teenagers, but they were actually doing the work for the first time, and demographically balanced, right? So we had all the same kids as the rest of the school. Uh, but kids were doing the work, and that just lit me up. So it's like I'm all in, right? So we went all in, and then we started doing some teachers teaching teachers across the state about project-based learning. It might have been called like an unconference kind of thing. It was kind of that grassroots where we just showed up and shared, and then we
Love it.
formalized things into Magnify Learning at some point, and we've been rolling. I've been rolling for about a decade or so. Wrote a book to go along with the work and share a bunch of stories and just show people that PBL isn't perfect. Like you're going to have wins, you're going to have losses, right? And you just continue to iterate. And but it's totally worth it, right? Like so that's kind of my story at the end is like that's why I got into education. It's why I switched from
Mm.
engineering to education was the PBL portion. And once I found that, just couldn't stop telling people about it. So here I am, right? So appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And thank you for sharing that context because I think it's really important as we talk about, I talk with so many people across the really world now, and one of the
Yeah.
things that is a through line in those conversations is the power of PBL and the power more so of, and this is what I'd love your opinion on, you know, in my opinion, as I craft PBL experiences, even for preschoolers, there is personalization that's kind of automatically
Yeah.
embedded in that if you really, want to get to learners. So talk to me a little bit about, your initial experiences in creating projects that were relevant to middle schoolers. That's a hard age group, by the way.
Oh, it is. That's why I loved it. And middle school
Yeah,
teachers get this, right? It's like I loved eighth graders and like couldn't stand seventh graders, right? There's just a huge difference that happens there. But it's such a critical year because even if you've never tried in your first 8 years, you don't have this credit deficit that you'll have in high school, right? So eighth grade can
that's
be this
right.
turning point for you. So I just love that age.
Mm,
And when you give kids purpose to their learning, like they get it, right? So I had kids that had their head down in every other class, right? But then they'd get to us, they put their head up. And Garrett, well, we went to the local park and cleaned up the park, like service learning project, right? But
love it.
the twist was we did like a bar graph of all the trash and recyclables that we found, and then we made a pitch to city council to say this is what you should put in the park, right? Well, we had kids that would normally have their head down, like fighting over garbage, right, to like get enough to like make their bar graph, and because I think they saw the the purpose behind it, right? It was so evident what the purpose was that they got involved and suddenly they're engaged in a way that they hadn't been before. So I think if you can
That's
give kids the why, and I know people talk about the why a lot, but I still lead every PD that I lead with Simon Sinek, and we talk about the power of why, right? Because it's so important. It's got to be in there.
And I think, again, going back to the work we've done is, that why equals curiosity and
Yeah.
overall curiosity is smart. That's kind of as all of this work is coming together, one of the key pieces, traits, if you will, is, being open, one, to not being right all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
two, asking that why question. And, I think it's so powerful talking about the why, but I also think it's really important that that why is real world, that it's
Oh, for
because you
sure.
can talk about like a fantasy why, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're in a magical tube and we need to X, Y, or
Nope.
Z. How important it is because we are all human, that the work you're doing is like in that moment, I would imagine they felt gratitude and what's the word? They felt good
Yeah.
about doing service work for their neighborhood and then taking it a step further. I just think that's so, so, so important when it comes to the future of learning is involving people in a co-created experience. And so that leads me to my next question is, you know, in partnerships, right? Not only with your learners, but I would imagine in crafting these PBLs, you're partnering with the outside community as well,
Yeah.
too. What are some of the cool partnerships that you can think of that you've established in the past, or maybe even encouraged and connected to really land with those learners on the ground?
There's so many because we think you're spot on that it has to be an authentic problem that you're solving, right? So anybody from, we had a DNA analyst from the state police that came in. So,
So cool.
right. So you're talking with eighth graders about, DNA, and Dr. Bush is just crushing it, right? And it's over our heads, right? The stuff she's talking about, but it's so authentic that we're learning, right? It was
Yep.
amazing. Uh,
Oh,
Doctors' offices. We had an awesome unit where the Hemophilia Society came in,
very
and we've
cool.
got to teach kids about the Punnett Square, which is, unless you're a science teacher, it's not inherently exciting, right? And so came in, said, hey guys, every day a parent finds out that their child has a genetic disease, and they want to know two questions. Number one, is my child going to be okay? Number two, they want to know everything there is to know about that disease. Hey, eighth graders, would you help us inform these parents? Heads go up. You
Boom.
know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I do want to do
exactly.
that, right? Like,
I'm
yes, I do want to
engaged.
help, right? Yeah, right. I'm getting goosebumps just telling the story, and forever ago.
Yeah.
But it it engages kids, and then they say, yes, I do want to help. Okay, great. Well, guess what? You have to know the Punnett square in order to talk about this intelligently. What's the Punnett square? Well, do you want to help these parents? Yeah, we do. Do you want me to teach you about the Punnett square so that you can help these parents? Yeah, I do. And a kid from generational poverty that does not see school as important just asked you to teach him something. That's the twist. That's the shift that has to happen. And then it's amazing what happens after that.
Because I think the kids, I think you're spot on. I think the kids nowadays, talking about that seventh to eighth grade shift, I have kids in that age group right now,
Yeah.
and watching my own become more of themselves, right? More independent,
Yeah.
more opinionated, more thoughtful and deep. I think, involving them in an activity where they have the ability to express themselves freely and share ideas, and also in a time where difference is so highlighted between each other, to have an environment where those differences come together to make something magic happen, and that
Yeah.
that one of the cool project-based learning experiences I did with a summer camp was did a music camp. I'm a musician, and we did this great music camp, very hands-on. They wrote a song, that was their challenge. And at the end of the week, we had listened to music that they had loved as part of our morning circle. And one of these songs was by this band, 5 Seconds of Summer. And this was a while ago, of course, but it was like a pop punk band. Well, I just so happened to know the producer of that band and surprised them on the Friday with a live call. And this leads to my next
Yeah.
question, where it's them talking to this producer of the song that they've played all week. And again, like in a world where kids are like this, right?
Yeah.
In a world where you're virtual learning and they have the ability to turn the camera off, the fact that they're engaged, even virtually, is magical. And so that does lead me. You've done this for a decade, which is awesome, right? Like you saw the light a long time ago. And I love the fact that it's rooted in engineering, because a lot of those same processes
Yeah.
line up, right? Talk about a little bit about how do you have a framework that you've developed beyond the kind of the PBL framework? And then two, talk about how technology has supported that experience over this past decade, one of the most transformative kind of evolutions of technology ever that we've experienced.
Yeah. So I'll start kind of micro in my PBL world and build out, right? So we've got 6 steps to project-based learning, right? And because we want to make project-based learning simplified, we want it to be simple. It's not going to be easy. It's never going to be easy to reach kids. And that's not why we got into the profession, right? It's not why it's a calling or a
Amen.
passion, right? So, but we
Amen.
can make it simple. So I can't make it easy for you, but I can make it simple. I can give you a process. So within that, if you go a little more macro, if you kind of zoom out a little bit more, I think you kind of said future ready learners, but we kind of say profile of a graduate, right? Like what do we want our kids to
Yes.
know when they leave our system?
I love
But
that
then
program, by
also,
the way.
and then profile of a teacher. Like what kind of teachers, like what are the 5, kind of things that you need to be a teacher in a PBL environment and have it thrive? And then same thing for leaders, right? Like if we want our students to be critical thinkers, which I know you're big on, like we need leaders and teachers that are being critical thinkers. And a lot of times we've never asked our staff to think critically. We've never said that this is the bar, or this is what we want you to have. And in schools where we do these profiles, especially the teacher one, it's like, okay, we've got 5 candidates to fill this one position. Which one fits our profile? Not which one has the most experience, not which one is really good at talking or speaking, because that doesn't necessarily translate to the classroom. Which one fits our true profile? And if once you have those profiles, the North Star, if you will, now you start to reverse engineer what's it look like for your local context. And that's when you get some amazing scenarios for kids.
That's so awesome, and something that we talk a lot about on the show, which is embodying the practices we wish to see within our learners. And,
Yeah.
you nailed it in the sense of we see the vision as developing that profile, right? And then going right to the educators. Like people think like, and it's happening at scale right now, which is here's these great innovative tech tools for your school. Let's not train your team properly on them, waste millions of dollars,
Yep.
add many more things to a learner's, life and take nothing away. So now we're just piling on all of this crap and not implementing it in a way that's like truly meaningful for the educators, and then holding the educators accountable when we know, right, that the implementation is so important. Why not, like you're saying, put your educators through a project-based learning experience to learn about project-based learning experiences?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Boom. Like
Right. We
that.
can't think of any other way to do it, Garrett. Honestly, that's how we've always done it. Right. It just makes
It
sense.
is, yeah. And, some of my earlier work that I haven't mentioned was with a company called Alt School that was founded by the former director of
Mhm.
personalization from Google, Max Ventilla. Um, Big company, great ideas. This was probably 10, 12 years ago. And they were, yeah, I remember meeting them and meeting this gentleman, Dan. I'm thinking of his last name. Hold on. I'm drawing a complete Dan Barber, sorry, working over there. And he had that understanding 12 years ago of like, as we were working with them on how to collaborate with what was a very early learning management system,
Yep.
he was putting us all through this process that the system would go through. And by the time we hit this platform, we were all just like fully understanding not just how it worked, but the possibilities
Yeah.
that this platform could function and apply that to anything, right? So if you're engaged, you learn. And
Yeah.
project-based learning, in my opinion, is one of, if not the only way, because it can be so flexible in what you're doing and how you're applying it to really get engaged learners. So is there any, one, have you taken that framework that you're speaking to, and is that in book form now? Talk to us a little bit about your
Mm.
book. I would love to be able to share that with our audience who will gobble it up. I promise you
Sure.
that.
Yeah. So PBL simplified, walks you through the 6 steps of PBL. There's 2 chapters though that might relate to this part of the conversation. There's 2 chapters
Mm,
around leadership. What does the leadership need to look like to guide this work? And then what's implementation look like, right? Like, what are you going to
mm,
do? Are you going to, hey, I heard Ryan talking a podcast, guys, we're doing PBL this year, ready, go. It's like, don't do that, right? Like, please. And I love PBL, right? So don't do that, It's
right,
like, how do you implement? Are you going to do a school within a school? Are you going to do a whole school model? Because that can be done well. Are you going to do a separate school within a larger district, right? We love leadership teams. So you get a leadership team that's excited about it of, principals, APs, and lead teachers, and let them start to pilot that. Well, I don't like to say pilot because pilots can fail. Have them test out, does PBL work in your school? Because
right.
I can give you research, I can give you great examples, but every teacher really wants to know, will PBL work in my classroom? That's all they
That's
care
right.
about. And that's okay, right? Like that should be what they care about. That's their arena. So if you can start to give them success stories from Victor, who's in your school district, that starts to really change minds way more than I think the research that we can show.
Yeah, and that's ultimately, I think, been the problem in sharing out. I mean, project-based learning obviously has increased in popularity across the
Sure.
board, but I think you call out something that is systemically happening both in private school systems and public school systems, which is the implementation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you think about change for any educator, whether it's early education all the way through to high school, you introduce change, you introduce a new
Yes.
already uninformed pessimism, right? They're already like, well, another thing that we've got to do. So I think it's just, so important the work that, folks like you are doing, working with school districts and even understanding because you've done this so long, how to implement that. Because I'm with you. You have to find those change makers within schools, those stars, right, that are willing to kind of show in action side by side how this all works and why it's so meaningful. And I think one of the things that I wanted to pivot into is artificial intelligence. It's a big conversation, obviously, in our industry, but I think I see a path where you can have these experiences. And in the current world, I think the struggle is mapping PBL to state standards, right? The outcomes of PBL, mapping that to state
Sure.
standards. Do you think that AI can support that work? And beyond that, like, do you see AI as a assist in crafting PBL?
Yeah, I don't think AI is going away next week, right? So right, we've got to embrace it in some form, right? And
Right.
really, our PBLers, like if you get this, like you understand that if your learners are using AI, to turn in this worksheet, then okay, that's what you've asked them to do, right? So if in PBL we have these wicked problems where there's not just an AI, answer for it. Now, can AI help you out? Of course. And should you be able to look at AI and say, well, what sources did it pull from, right? And be able to analyze that well. So I think you can use the same thing, at a teacher level and at a district level, is, but we're not training people on how to do it, right? I'm going to guess that that's a gap that you want to fill, right? Like you probably see that. It's like, because you can't just say, well, go use Chat GPT to make your rubric. Okay, neat. But like, I've never used Chat GPT before.
That's
Right?
right.
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to go YouTube it. And then, because you could totally figure it out. But why don't we tee people up and say, hey, we're going to do a workshop on how to create a rubric using Chat GPT, and just that one piece, right? Or ask people, like, ask your staff, what takes the most time for you in a unit
Mm.
that you think maybe we
Huh.
could, figure it out? Because it's figure outable, right?
Totally. And time is currency for an educator, right? Like
Oh yeah.
it's just so, so, so important. And we do see, you know, how valuable it is to figure out ways to save people time. And I think, you know, you need going back to the importance of leadership from the top. It's just so important for the people that are even in your school district, the superintendent, to not just, you know, thumb it up in the budget, but to get involved with future forward learning approaches like project-based learning. So talk to me a little bit, going back to your work with school districts. Have you seen kind of whole district or helped to implement whole district world or not worldwide, but like school-wide
Mm.
PBL, like informed learning? Or has it always just been, you know, kind of one school off and you know, you have a PBL school in your repertoire, if you will,
Yeah,
as a
sure.
school district?
Yeah, great question. So definitely done, the school implementation piece, right? Where you've got a leader that gets it. And we think sustainability is really important. Like we've seen our
Mm,
work just disappear with a principal change, right? So we've got these sustainability days that we build in to think about, like, what's 3 years out look like? What's the
mm,
profile of the teacher look like? That's nestled in that one. So we've had principals like rock it with one school and then go to the next school and like have a plan and ready to go. But to answer your question, we're working with, I think it's the fifth largest district in Indiana. And uh, what I love about the work, and I think that there's an overarching lesson to learn here, is that it's not a top-down mandate. Everybody's going to do PBL, or you're going to be a PBL school. It's all right. What leaders are already like inclined to this innovative
mm.
practice, right? And because we're moving in this direction, our evaluation is moving us in this direction, right? So they
That's
have an
right.
innovative evaluation. So if you want to get to the right side of your evaluation, you probably need to be doing project-based learning. Oh, okay. What do I do? Well, we have trainings over the summer, right, to help you figure this out. So it's really, we've super customized it for every school leader. So one school leader's got, he's got some PBL certified staff. So they're going to lead the charge. Another one, he's got no idea, but he knows it's the right path to go. So he's got a leadership team, right? So we're coaching the leadership team and they're coaching their staff. Another school is trying to get to a tipping point. So they run everybody through that PBL jumpstart, right? So there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I think the overarching lesson is that you can oversimplify, or you could try to make it easy in a way that doesn't help change mindset, which is really what we're trying to do, right? So if you get, I know there are a lot of like PBL, you can go to Teachers Pay Teachers and get a PBL unit, right? Or there's a lot of examples out there and you go grab it and then you pull it in your classroom, it doesn't work. It's like, of course not, right? Like it's not your local community, it's not your kids, you didn't plan it. I think you do the same thing with AI, right? It's just like, well, our rubric example, right? Hey, everybody make a rubric using Chat GPT. Well, what if we haven't really done the mindset work around why you have a rubric, right? Is it to
The
grade?
meta.
Is it to
Yep.
communicate, right? If you haven't done that mindset work, then I think you're misusing the tools. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's so clippable. And I fully agree. I think, understanding why, again, coming back to why,
Yeah.
like, and take that back farther and farther and farther to inform, I think, better practice. It's, you know, so important to root in almost like an you said earlier, which I'll call back, which is like we got into this because it's in our hearts, right? So like we got into it
Yeah,
because
that's
it's a
right.
calling. And I'm passionate about that because we have seen a crisis, right? Of like people leaving this industry, people being, hyper criticized during a pandemic. Who saw that coming as an educator? But you see this mass exodus, and there is negative aspects. I employ a ton of teachers, and I've felt it, on that end. But I also look at it as an opportunity for a shift, right? I think the people that are staying in this career are the people tough enough to
Hmm.
inform the change that you're talking about,
Yeah.
because it's going to take a little extra work. It's going to take what you said, which is a mindset shift. And I think that's how do you see that leading into my next question? How do you see that scaling out? Have you thought about, I mean, obviously you're doing amazing work. How do you see that eventually kind of scaling so that we can create a little bit more of a consistency when it comes to future approaches in public classrooms?
Yeah, let me frame your problem a little bit more too, and just kind of add on to that. When I see some of the teachers that are leaving the profession, some of them are rock stars,
Yeah,
right? But they're not in an environment where they can do the rock star work they want to do, right? So I think at some point it's going to be survival that you need to take care of your rock star teachers that they're going to leave. So you've got to
yep.
let them have an environment and framework where they can do innovative work. And then how
Because
you go
I was
ahead.
just gonna, sorry, I was saying like because that's teaching. I think one of
Yeah.
the things that I've learned in opening innovative schools is what I didn't see coming was that educators work for me because of that freedom, because they
Yes,
they have that
they
freedom to
do.
educate. So continue.
Right?
Apologies.
Oh, it's a huge point. I figured the
Yeah.
addition of the problem would resonate with you, right? Because
Yeah.
we can't be losing rock star teachers too that get this work and want to push it. And we see more than ever that as schools will stand up and say, hey, we're doing this different. Look at our profile of a graduate, like we're looking at future ready skills, that now it's drawing those innovative teachers to those principals, right? And those
That's right.
leaders that are truly going to lead, not manage. And it's a big deal. And I want to mention this because I'd love your feedback on it, because I think this is how we scale it. So the next book that's in process right now is called Asset Based School Development. How do we
Very
look at the
cool.
bright spots, right? The things that are working in our individual schools and districts, and how do we magnify those portions instead of continually harping on the deficits, right? It's really hard to build on a whole, right? But let's build on the foundation that we already have. So I think our view is going to be that it's the assets, the teachers, like you said, that are still there, that are still cranking this out, that are saying, man, maybe next year I'm going to be able to teach the way I really want to teach. And they're still here. Let's build on those teachers, right? Let's build on the assets that every school has. Every school has something going for them that's working. Let's build on that.
Yeah, and I fully agree. And I think suggestions of, gosh, how do you motivate those rock star teachers in such a difficult environment? And one of the things that
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of learned in trying to do the same, right? Like there's two-part problem of we need a new way of learning for our learners, but we also need a new way of thinking for how we
Yep.
treat these passionate people that literally shape the future of our world, literally.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and what it's come down to is pretty simple, right? It's that they have agency and value,
Mm-hmm.
and that they are paid. I mean, money's a real thing, and honestly, that's kind of where I see the most support can happen is in those two areas equally,
Yeah.
right? Is that realistic in most school systems? No. But on the value side of things, those are things that don't have to cost, money, that are in some ways, it's 50-50. So they're equally as important to hear the attaboys, you know what I mean? Not to
Yeah.
put that term back out, but that's the best way I can think of it. How do you think teachers can be kind of supported in classrooms across the country in such a difficult environment.
That's good. So I think you're kind of skirting around a little bit of this work that Daniel Pink did in his book Drive, right? Like why do great people do great things? And it turns out it's not money. Like that's not the top piece, right? It's autonomy, it's purpose, and money's in there, right? We still need to get paid, we still need to pay bills. I remember when I went from engineering to teaching, my principal asked, so like, what kind of pay cut are you
I can
taking?
like see the bar of the line graph.
Right? I was like, Mark, we just signed. Do you really want to ask? It's like, but it was a 50% pay cut, right? So you take a 50% pay cut to go do this innovative and passionate work. So I think what we have to do, we've been super grassroots in how Magnify Learning has been formed, but the work that happens with leadership is super important. And I don't know a better way to phrase it, but if you might have been a really great English teacher, so they're like, hey, why don't you be the department chair? Okay, great. Hey, why don't you be an AP? Why don't you be a principal? Well, all because I was a really great language arts teacher, right? So how are we training our leaders? I think is really, really important. And yes, literacy is incredibly important, and they need to know that. But I'm not sure that they have to be the expert in literacy in their building. I need them to be an expert in creating culture, in providing autonomy that also has accountability, right? Creating clarity in the vision. Like some of the really great leaders we work with, they know their three objectives, and every teacher knows their three objectives. Like these are the
That's
three
right.
things that we do well. And if we do these three things, we're going to win. And then there's also buildings where it's like everything's important. We're going to do everything. It's like that's really hard to thrive if you're a teacher and you have to do everything, right? There has to be a filter from the administrative level that says, I'm going to take care of some of this nonsense stuff. That has to happen, right? But how can we protect our teachers? And the great leaders, they know how to do that. They know how to say, hey guys, I couldn't protect you from this one. I just need you to bust it out. And then this one over here, I'm going to take this one, right? So that you can go do your work. So I think the leadership level is really the next place to dive into.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the key is empowering. You're kind of speaking my exact language, which is like empowering the closest around you in the morals, the values, the culture of your school system, and even for business owners out there for your business, and
Mm-hmm.
then never compromising. And that's the challenging part
Yeah.
as a leader, is to have these values out there and never cheat them, because people are
Yeah.
always watching. And the moment that you cheat those values in your
Yep.
schools, in your classrooms, is the moment where it all goes away. Right.
Yep.
And that's why there's this kind of, going back to these rock star educators and how important they are, is because they're like, going back to what you said, yes, they're not necessarily fully driven by money. They're definitely driven by, more so, that kid that they connected with, right? We think of it as
Yeah.
like being unforgettable to one person, and that being enough. You know what I mean? I think we all have this educator in our minds, especially if you're a teacher yourself, and even the shift from the down climb, if you will, but maybe even an up climb, right? Like for soul points and for your own values, and thinking about um, taking that shift and getting into education. um Being, I completely lost track of what I was talking about. I'm so sorry. Anyway, moving on. We'll cut that together. Moving on to where they can. We always end the show with the big question. We also like to think of a great show as a car ride home. We tend to think of, hopefully only people are 30 to 45 minutes on the way home. If you're
There you
longer
go.
than that, I apologize. But I'm really fascinated in your experience when it comes to project-based learning, and you've seen definitely expressions of SMART that are probably a little bit outside the box throughout your career, and hopefully, let's say hopefully outside the box. We're going to ask you the big question, Ryan. What do you think SMART is?
So I think smart is confidence, right? So
Ooh.
maybe you've got knowledge, you've got skills. You're smart when I can see it. You have the confidence to show me. So you might be presentation smart. You might be mechanically smart. You might be
Mhm.
musically smart, right? And as that kind of comes out, you might be leadership smart. I know a
Mhm.
leader that he's smart enough. and knows enough of his staff that he can dress up on, what is it, March 10th? If you spell out March 10th, it spells Mario. So he dresses up as Mario Kart characters, right? And completely disrupts the day. And his staff loves it, right? Because he's leadership smart. Like he gets those things. He's got the confidence to dress up like Mario and get his AP to dress up like Luigi, right? And they drive through the school. It's like, so the confidence, I think, is what really brings out that smartness. Because otherwise, as we were coming on, I was talking to some colleagues and I said, I'm going to be on this What is Smart podcast. Like, what do you guys think smart is? And for us, because we're so growth mindset, like everybody kind of stepped back and said, ooh, I don't, if you call a kid smart, I feel like you're going to box them in and they don't have to learn anymore, right? They're the smart kid that doesn't have to learn. And so for us, I can't say for us, but for me, as I'm, kind of thinking through this question and mulling it over, for the last couple of months, you've got me really thinking on this. I love it, Garrett. It's like,
That's
but it's
awesome.
confidence, right? It's confidence. What have you learned? What do you know how to do that you can now bring to the world? Because that's what we need. We need you to bring your gifts, talents to the world.
That's exactly right, because everyone has those unique abilities, and the shame, right, that we should all feel is the kids that are out there that don't get the opportunity,
Uh,
the one question, the one meaningful learning moment that sparks that, oh my God, I'm super good at this, right?
yeah,
And I've never heard that answer, confidence. I think it's really an amazing answer when it comes to, because again, I think purpose is spending all the time. I don't know who said this. I watched some video. It might have been Simon Sinek, but spending all of your time finding what you're passionate about and what you love, and then applying that to how it can help people. And that's your purpose in life. And it's a shame that we're not crafting more learning moments like this. I mean, mind you, it is growing thanks to folks just like you, that we're not spending any more time like, because we should be spending all of our time empowering kids to seek out what those passion and skills are, and that automatically informs a project-based learning environment, a
yeah,
relevant environment for, because again, if you're or let's say you're sharing curriculum and you're using something that was relevant 10 years ago, now you're doing a history lesson within a PBL that they have to figure out, right? Like,
yeah, that's
no,
right.
like
Yeah,
you're in a very game-changing time right now. I did a project. You'll appreciate this. So there's been a lot of news around things like UFOs, something that I'm super passionate about, to the stars, hugely like nerdy about all of that stuff. But it's a real thing, right? Like we have
yeah,
data. People are tracking things. It's great information. And during our summer camps, we do project-based learning for school-age kids, so all the way up to 12 years old. So we're doing 10 and 12-year-olds, and we're talking about this issue, and watching the videos that have been shared and seeing what their perspectives are. I haven't seen more, like you said, engaged learners. It doesn't matter necessarily the outcome of these projects, guys. It's the
sure.
process. Process is where we learn. In process we fail, and where we fail we learn. So Ryan, like, the work you're doing, the book you're about to write, I think you're spot on with. So
Awesome.
continue
Thank you.
down that road. And this is
Yeah,
my like passion. This is the work that I'm doing in the background, is not necessarily the amazing innovative stuff that you're doing, but more so the thinking about that mindset shift and how to do that at scale and how to push that down. And you've already called out, and this is what I had forgot about, that'll probably get edited out later, but it came back to me, which is, having the right tools combined with something that you seem very passionate about, which is culture,
yeah,
is,
for
I
100%.
really think, the answer. If you can inform that culture, and it needs to be, folks like you, folks like me across the world informing that, because we're talking about a dynamic world global cultural shift we need to be prepared for, because that needs to happen, right? But the tools are meaningless without that
Correct.
cultural mindset shift. So just thank you, dude. Keep doing the work you're doing. We really appreciate it here at the Gardens Foundation. We always give our guests the ability to share with our community what you're doing, how they can find you, how they can pick up your book. So please do share with our listeners and viewers where your stuff is at.
Sure. Before I do that, I've got one thing I've got to push back on you a
Of
little
course.
bit.
I
Because
like it.
you elevated me, which I appreciated, but you kind of downplayed your work. And I think your question of what is smart is such an appropriate challenge because, you know, decades ago when I graduated high school, I was a smart kid, right? Like I was, and this is why I start telling in my story, I was a smart kid, but I got into a career. If I would have stayed there, I would have hated it. Right? Like
Mm.
it would have been awful. It would have been good for my family. Like my whole family dynamic is completely different because I finally found my purpose. So when I think of, that smart kid that I was, in some ways my ladder was on the wrong wall. Like I wasn't figuring out what I was individually smart at. I was like school smart. Like I knew how to get points, which is not a skill that's
You play
useful,
the
right?
game. You
That's
were
right.
good at playing the game, man.
100%, right? I was good at video games in school. It's the same thing, right? Just getting points. So we've got to get the ladder up on the right wall. And I think your question has us redefining smart, which is fundamentally important to all this work.
Well,
So thank you so much for the opportunity today.
yeah, no,
People,
I really appreciate it. Continue. Sorry.
yeah, no, man, I so appreciate the work. People can reach out to us. They can go to pblsimplified.com and you can get a whole set of free videos. You get one a week and it'll walk you right through the PBL process. You can pick up the book, of course, the same title, PBL Simplified.
Put
And
that all
that'll get,
here.
yep, that'll get you going. It'll get you started. And then obviously they can reach out if there's any way that can help, whether it's a thought partner or if you want to partner and go deep and start making some profiles and change in your community. Like that's what we do, man. We are in 100%.
Yes, 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 yes. And guys out there, all what you're definitely in Ryan's wheelhouse, please do. The best way we can inform this work continuing is supporting this work continuing. And so just like folks like me, Ryan's out there doing his thing, working with school systems. If your school system needs help and you see that future, but you don't know how to get there,
Mm.
guys, please do. Please go to Ryan. There are folks out there doing that work. That's all they're doing. That's amazing, right? And thanks again, Ryan, for the compliment. I think what I've learned, and I'll end the show with this, what I've learned in talking with, you know, and don't mind the term, but smart people from across the world is that the more important the question, the more simple it is. And
Mm-hmm.
so what is smart is three words, but how powerful that question really can be, saying you sat months on it. I sit endlessly on this question of, how do we rethink evaluating someone's purpose? Because that's really what we're doing. It's like, can we build this purpose? And then can we share it with the world so that they're lined up with experiences that map to that purpose? And gosh, you're doing the work that's taking us steps closer. So thanks again, Ryan. And thank all of you out there for watching, for listening, for supporting the Gardens Foundation for What is Smart. I'm Garrett Wilhelm. Tune in next time for another amazing guest where we learn about their perspectives in shifting education and changing the world together. We'll see you next time.